Hey guys, it's Sukaso. Welcome to DayZ Standalone. This is going to be a short video where I walk you guys through on how to configure some of the settings to get better performance out of the game. Now, if you've played DayZ Standalone before, you've had performance problems. Don't feel bad. Everybody has. I have a very high-end computer, and even I'm not able to get 60 FPS consistently in the big cities. But there are some things that you can do to make your performance better all around. Uh, DayZ Standalone is an early access alpha. As such, it is a very poorly optimized example of the Arma 3 game engine. However, the Arma 3 game engine is a very robust one that does give us many options that we can configure and change to get better performance out of it, both in-game through the configure window and out-of-game by editing a few things in the config files. And I'm going to show you guys both of those and how to do that, and hopefully get some better performance out of it for you guys. Alright, so we'll go into configure, video, and first up, don't change the overall quality setting. Don't ever do that. It will override the changes we're going to make in the config file, so just don't do it. The VSync is totally up to you. Some people think that they get better performance with it disabled. I don't ever find that to be the case, but hey, to each their own. I like it enabled, so that way I don't go above 60 FPS. When I'm getting 60 FPS, it locks it at that, so I think it looks smoother and better. It also keeps the vertical tearing, the horizontal lines that run across your screen sometimes, if you have that in the game. If you turn VSync on, it makes that stop. Anyway, I'm not going to go into specifics of how and why, but yeah, to each their own. I like it enabled. In the user interface section, strangely enough, we find the option for the overall game resolution. Don't know why this is under user interface. Nothing in here actually changes the user interface except for the size option. That's personal preference. I like it normal. Like, do it larger. You can do it smaller. Whatever. I like normal. Aspect ratio. This is determined by your monitor, your graphics card, and what resolution size you're running in. Modern HD displays, they run in 16:9 widescreen format, so these screen resolutions would be 720, 1080, 1440, etc. If you're running one of those resolutions, put it in 16:9 to make it look as sharp and crisp as it should. Some monitors run 16:10, but you should know that. If you have a 1610 monitor, you should know that. If you don't, then whatever looks best. But now, if your resolution, this can have a surprisingly large impact on your performance. Say in other games, maybe you run 1440. If you run 1440 in other games, and you try that here, you're probably going to be getting really crappy FPS. I would recommend toning it down to 1080, and trying it then, and your FPS will go up. The smaller your resolution size, the better your performance, simply because there's less things that it's trying to render on the screen. So if after all of these changes, I'm going to show you how to do, if after all that you're still getting bad performance, I would recommend dropping it down from 1080 to 720, and I guarantee you will get an FPS boost just from doing that. Yeah, it won't look as good, but whatever, your FPS will definitely go up. Now, another thing you can try is the rendering resolution percentage. This is the subsampling percentage, so for example, with it at a resolution of 1080, if I have it at 100%, that means it's rendering at that number. It's rendering at whatever your screen resolution is. Now, if we were to boost this up to 200%, my screen would still stay at 1080, but it would look like a 4K display. It would look like 2160. Of course, my FPS would go down to like 5, but that's what that does. So, if you have it in 1080 and you drop this down to 67%, my screen again will remain in 1080, but it will look like and be rendering as though my screen was set to 720. So that's another way to do it to improve performance. It won't look as good, but it will definitely give you better FPS. Now, under the texture settings, you want your video memory to be auto. That way it will automatically use as much of your video card as it can. You don't want it to specify a specific megabyte size. And if you have larger than a 2 gig card, like I have a 3 gig card, there's not even any option for that. So just leave it to auto, it will run the best, I think. Texture detail and texture filtering. This does not have as big of an impact on the FPS as you might think. So I leave them at normal. And even graphically, it doesn't seem to look that much better. High textures don't really look any better than normal, so yeah. If after everything, though, you're still having problems, try toning these down. Under quality, these have the biggest impact, I find. Shadows, you want that disabled. You don't want to run shadows. I don't think they look as good, and it will give you better performance without them. Clouds doesn't seem to make a lick of difference. You can turn those to very high, and you're gonna get the same FPS as very low. I don't know. I just leave it at normal. Now, terrain has a big impact, though. I would turn that down to either low or very low. Same with objects, either low or very low. You see, the screen back here, it doesn't look bad at all, despite the fact I have it on very low and low. So, try that. Now, in the rendering, these have a big impact as well. I would leave anti-aliasing to normal, and your alpha to coverage, either put it to all trees and grass, or you can turn it down to arrowhead, and it will change the way some of the trees look. Or you could even disable it, and it will not look as good. Anyway, edge smoothing. I think it looks best disabled, actually, and you definitely get better performance with it disabled. HDR quality. Um, you can't turn that down. Yeah, put it to very low. Just put it to very low. And disable post-processing and disable ambient occlusion. And be sure that the slider bar for bloom is all the way down. That will give you the best performance. Now, that's what you can do in-game. Now, there's some things we can change in the config file that will give you a huge boost to your FPS. If you've already tried these things and you're still getting problems, try to change these things in the config file. So I'm going to exit out and show you how to do that. Okay, now to get even more performance out of the game, and this should boost your performance quite a bit, we can make a few legit, simple changes in the config file, and I'll walk you guys through that right now. It's really easy. We just go into my computer, my documents, and in here there's a folder called DayZ. Now, as always, when you're changing files, take a backup of them before you do anything. So highlight them, do Control-C, and then make yourself a new folder, and call it whatever, backup for DayZ, and then Control V and paste an unaltered, unadulterated copy of those config files before you go messing with them. So, and then we'll just back up and go back to the DayZ folder here, and we see there are 3 different config files. The one here that's your player name vars DayZ, don't change anything in there. The one we're looking for is player name.DayZ profile. Now, if you try to open one of these config files and it gives you this pop-up, don't fret. All we have to do is select a program from a list of installed programs, and we're looking for Notepad, not WordPad, Notepad. Select that and open it up with that, and voila, we have a huge list of very confusing abbreviations and numbers. And what we're looking for in here, scroll all the way down to the bottom. What we're looking for is scene complexity. I can't remember. I think by default it's set to some stupid high number like 1.5 million. We want to tone that down to 125,000. And just be very careful in here that you have no extra spaces, and make sure that they stay on the right lines. Okay, so it should look just like this, and it should be equal sign, and then no space, 1, 2, 5, and then 0, 0, 0, no space, semicolon. So just basically backspace out whatever was in there before very carefully, and then 125. 1, 2, 3. 125,000, no comma. Okay? And some people say change the shadow distance, but we have shadows disabled, so it's unnecessary. The big thing here is the view distance. Now, for the ARMA engine, it sets the view distance way too far. And there's a limit to how far you can see anyway. With a long-range scope on a sniper rifle or with the binoculars, you can only see so far anyway. So what we're looking for is that sweet spot where we're not giving ourselves any disadvantage, and we can still see as far as the scope can possibly see anyway. And that just happens to be a view distance of 2,500 and an object distance of 1,800. So even if someone had this set to 18,000, they still would not be able to see farther with the long-range scope than if it were just set to 1,800. So that's what we want to set it to. 2,500 for view distance, preferred object view distance 1,800. And once we set those, then we're done with this file. You can just do File, Save, and close it. Don't change any of that, or you can just close it and click Save through there. Next thing we want to change is in the DayZ.cfg, and if it gives you that pop-up again, just do the same thing. Open it with a list of preferred programs from the list, and choose Notepad. Now in here, we want to change the GPU max frames ahead. Make sure that's set to 1, and GPU detected frames ahead, I think by default it was set to 1000. Just back out the zeros and set it to 1. So it should be 1, 1. And I guess you could change some other things in here, but you can change these from the other from the in-game menus. Now remember, anytime you change something in the in-game menu, it will alter it in the config files, and anytime you change something in the config files, it will possibly override it in-game. So you might not have the same graphic settings after you do your changing around the config files and you load up the game, and your settings might look different. It'll be at very low instead of you had it before set to low. That's because you changed the stuff in the config file. And inversely, if you go changing it, change the overall quality slider, for example, in-game, it's going to mess all this up and you're going to have to redo it. So just don't change things once you get it set like this, okay? So now that we have those, what was it, 5 things done, just save them and load the game back up, and you should be getting, I would think, at least 10 to 20 FPS better. It really makes a huge difference changing the scene complexity, the view distance, and the GPU frames ahead. So hopefully that will help you out with your FPS and performance issues you might have been having. DayZ is a great game. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't played it yet, it might be a good time to jump into it. The darkest days with the worst bugs are well behind it. It's about halfway through its early access development cycle now. The 0.53 update just came out about a week ago, and they're doing great work with it. They clamped down big time on the hackers and cheaters, and I've been playing pretty much every day since the update, and I have not seen a hacker or cheater since. So yeah, they're doing great work with it. Maybe if you haven't played in a while, it might be a good time to come back to it. Anyway though, I hope this guide helped you out and learned something maybe. If so, drop me a comment, let me know. And don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe for more. Until next time, I hope you all have a good one.